It was a quiet afternoon at the local cafe, with the soft hum of conversation and the clinking of silverware echoing in the background. The waitress, Emma, moved between the tables, her smile warm as she took orders and served food to the customers. She was used to the routine, but today something felt different. The cafe wasn't particularly busy, and she had a few extra moments to observe the customers around her. Her attention was drawn to a table near the window where two young girls were sitting. They couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. They were dressed in simple, slightly worn dresses, and their faces looked tired. The way they sat, fidgeting in their seats, glancing around nervously, told Emma that something was off. The girls didn't speak much. They only whispered to each other every now and then, with occasional glances at the menu in front of them. It wasn't the behavior she normally saw from children their age, and it made her curious. Emma had a soft spot for children. Growing up in a working-class family herself, she knew what it was like to face struggles, even from a young age. She could sense the discomfort in the girls' silence, and it stirred something within her. Maybe it was the way their clothes didn't match the neatness of the restaurant, or the way they seemed unsure of the prices on the menu. But something inside Emma made her pause and take notice. She wanted to help, even if it was just in a small way. As she approached the table, she greeted them with a bright smile. "Hey there, what can I get for you today?" she asked gently, trying to make them feel at ease. The girls looked up, a little startled, and then quickly returned their gaze to the menu. The older of the two, a little girl with curly hair, finally spoke. We'll just have water, please," she said quietly. Emma smiled again. "Just water? Are you sure? There are some really good sandwiches on the menu. I can bring you something special." The girls exchanged a glance, their eyes filled with uncertainty. Emma noticed their hesitation. It was as if they were afraid to ask for anything more. She could sense that they were holding back, not wanting to burden anyone. But Emma wasn't about to let them leave hungry. "I tell you what," she said softly. "I'll bring you something special, and don't worry about it. You don't have to pay for it today." The girls' eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, they didn't know how to respond. Emma could see their confusion, and then, after a long pause, the younger one spoke. "But we don't have much money. We can't pay." Emma crouched down beside the table, her expression sincere. "I know, sweetie. It's okay. You don't have to worry about that today. I want to help, and you both deserve to have something nice to eat." The older girl's face softened, and a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. Emma stood up and walked back to the kitchen, where she quickly grabbed a couple of sandwiches and some juice, thinking the girls might need something filling and comforting. When she returned to the table, she set down the food with a flourish. "Here you go. On the house," she said. "I hope you enjoy it." The girls stared at the food for a moment, as though unsure whether it was real. Then, as if on cue, they both picked up their sandwiches and took a bite. Their faces lit up with delight, and Emma couldn't help but smile as she watched them. For the first time during their meal, the girls seemed at ease, laughing and talking in a way that warmed Emma's heart. She felt proud of her small act of kindness, knowing it had made their day a little better. As she watched them eat, Emma thought back to her own childhood. She knew what it was like to feel uncertain, to struggle with money, and to wonder if anyone would notice. But this simple act of kindness, this small gesture of paying for their meal, felt like the right thing to do. She didn't know their story, and she didn't need to. All she knew was that they were two young girls who deserved something good in their lives, even if just for one afternoon. Emma moved away to attend to other customers, but she kept her eye on the table. There was something about those girls that touched her deeply. She was happy that, in that moment, she could make a difference, no matter how small. And as she worked, she silently hoped that this act of kindness would be one of the many that would make their lives a little easier, even if just for today. Emma continued to watch the twins from afar, a contented smile still on her face. She felt good about her decision to pay for their meal. The joy on their faces as they enjoyed the sandwiches was more than enough to make her day. She had seen so many people come in and out of the cafe, but something about these two little girls stood out to her. It was as though she had done something truly meaningful, and it made her feel a deep sense of fulfillment. She was moving back toward the kitchen when the sound of the doorbell chimed, signaling someone had entered the cafe. Emma barely noticed, too focused on cleaning a few glasses at the counter. But then, she heard the soft yet confident footsteps approaching the twins' table, and she couldn't help but glance over. A man had entered the cafe, his presence immediately noticeable. He wasn't loud or brash, but there was something about him that exuded authority. He was tall, with neatly combed hair, wearing a well-fitted suit that looked expensive and polished. His steps were steady, purposeful, but there was a gentle air to him as he made his way toward the twins. The twins, who had been quietly eating, suddenly looked up, their faces lighting up in an instant. "Papa!" the older twin exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. The younger girl's eyes brightened as she ran toward the man, her small arms reaching out for a hug. The father bent down, opening his arms wide, and the girls rushed into his embrace. Emma, who had been observing the scene from across the room, was taken by surprise. She had assumed that the girls were alone, maybe struggling, but now here was a man, clearly well off, who seemed to be their father. Emma froze in place, her hand halfway to the glasses she had been wiping. Her mind raced. How could the girls, dressed in modest clothing, and eating the simple meal she had provided, be the children of this well-dressed man? There was no denying that the father seemed affluent. The sleek suit, the expensive watch peeking from under his cuff, and the confident way he moved all spoke of someone who was at ease in his success. The contrast between the man and the girl's earlier behavior didn't sit well with Emma. She couldn't understand. Were they pretending? Or was something else going on? The father stood up, lifting both girls off the ground, one under each arm. They giggled as they clung to him, obviously overjoyed at seeing him. Emma watched, a mixture of confusion and curiosity running through her. She hadn't expected this turn of events. It was clear the father loved his children deeply, as he showered them with affection and smiles. But something about the whole scene felt off. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than she understood. The man looked over and saw Emma standing there, her gaze fixed on them. He smiled warmly at her, but there was a hint of hesitation in his eyes. He could tell that she was surprised. He gently set the girls down and walked over to Emma, offering her a polite nod. "Hello," he said, his voice smooth and calm. "I'm sorry for the surprise. These are my daughters." Emma blinked, still processing the fact that the twins were his children. She returned his smile, but felt a slight twinge of embarrassment. "Oh, no need to apologize. I just didn't expect. Well, I didn't realize you were their father." The man chuckled softly. "Yes, I can imagine it must have been a bit of a shock. But it's not what you think." Before Emma could ask more questions, the man continued. "I'm a businessman. I have several projects, and I often travel for work. The girls spend a lot of time with their mother, but I like to take them out whenever I can. Today was a rare day off for me, so I wanted to treat them to lunch." Emma nodded, trying to process the situation. He was a businessman, yet there was something about his demeanor that didn't quite fit with the image of someone who lived in luxury every day. There was a gentleness to him, a care for his children that transcended material wealth. She could see that he wasn't just a rich man, but a loving father. The girls, now standing beside him, looked up at Emma with wide eyes. The older twin spoke, her voice shy yet full of gratitude. "Thank you for the lunch. It was really yummy." Emma smiled, feeling a sense of warmth spread through her. "You're welcome, sweetie. I'm glad you enjoyed it." The father glanced at the girls, and then back at Emma. "I've heard a lot about this cafe," he said. "It's nice to see such kindness. You've made my daughter's day, and I'm truly grateful." There was a sincerity in his voice that took Emma by surprise. She had assumed that people with wealth were often disconnected, living in their own bubble. But this man, his calm demeanor, the way he spoke to his daughters, made her rethink her assumptions. For a brief moment, Emma felt a sense of unease about her earlier assumption that the girls might have been poor. But at the same time, she felt a renewed respect for this man and his family. Perhaps, she thought, there were parts of their story she would never know. All that mattered was that, in this brief moment, she had done something good for them, and it had been appreciated in ways she couldn't have imagined. As the father and his daughters finished their meal and prepared to leave, Emma felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her act of kindness had created a ripple of positivity that she never expected. After the father and the twins had settled into their seats, the quiet hum of the cafe seemed to have shifted. Emma stood behind the counter, absent-mindedly wiping down the same glass she had polished several times. She couldn't stop thinking about the man and his daughters. The confusion that had been swirling in her mind only deepened. There was more to this family than she could comprehend, and it made her feel both curious and uncomfortable at the same time. As she turned to look at the father again, she noticed that he was smiling warmly at the girls, his voice low as he spoke to them. The way he interacted with his children made Emma's heart swell. His affection for them was undeniable. And for a moment, she forgot the confusion and just focused on the tenderness in his eyes. But then, just as she was about to go back to her duties, the father caught her eye once more. This time, he didn't just nod politely, but gestured for her to come over. "Excuse me, miss," he called softly, his voice smooth, yet filled with something else, a sense of earnestness that caught Emma off guard. Emma hesitated for a moment, unsure of whether she should approach. The father wasn't exactly a regular customer. In fact, she had never seen him before. But something in the way he called her made her feel like she should go over. Perhaps there was something more he wanted to say. Taking a deep breath, Emma made her way over to the table, still unsure of what the conversation might be. She was used to customers thanking her for service, but she had never experienced anything like this before. There was something about the whole situation, about the father and the twins, that felt different, almost like a scene from a movie. When she reached the table, the father smiled at her warmly. "I really appreciate your kindness today," he said, his voice sincere. "But I feel I owe you an explanation." Emma blinked, surprised by his words. She had expected him to thank her, of course, but an explanation? That seemed odd, considering the situation. Was he embarrassed by her paying for the meal? She hadn't meant to make him uncomfortable. "I didn't mean to make things awkward," Emma said softly, her voice filled with uncertainty. "I just wanted to help out the girls." The father's expression softened, and he shook his head. No, it's not that at all. In fact, I'm grateful for your kindness. But I owe you the truth about my daughters and why we're here today." Emma frowned slightly, intrigued by the father's words. "The truth? What do you mean?" He looked down at the table for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts, before looking back up at her. "You see, my daughters, they're part of a program, a charity initiative that my wife and I run. We've been taking them to various community projects to teach them the value of helping others. They come from a wealthy family, but we want them to understand that wealth isn't everything. That kindness, generosity, and empathy are just as important." Emma's eyes widened in shock. She had no idea. She had assumed that the twins were struggling, that their father wasn't around, that they were in need. She had thought they might have come from a background like her own, working class, where money was always tight. But the truth was far different. I had no idea," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just saw the way they were acting and thought." The father smiled gently, as if he had anticipated her reaction. "I understand. We keep our charity work separate from our personal lives. It's important to us that our children learn to give back, to make a difference. But they don't always know how to explain it. They may have seemed like they were uncomfortable, unsure, But that's because we've been teaching them not to expect anything in return for kindness. They were probably just afraid to order too much, thinking they might be taking advantage of someone's generosity. Emma's heart softened as she listened. She had been so quick to judge, so quick to assume that the girls had no resources or help, when in reality, they were learning some of the most important life lessons of all. She felt a wave of guilt wash over her, mixed with admiration. The father continued, "You see, our wealth, it doesn't define who we are as a family. We want our daughters to be humble, kind, and generous. And that's why I make sure to involve them in these kinds of programs. They need to see that even those who have everything should still help others." Emma nodded slowly, absorbing the depth of what he was saying. She realized then that her initial assumptions had been all wrong. She had seen the twins as poor, struggling, and in need, but they were not in the position she thought they were. They were being taught by their parents to appreciate the value of others, to understand that kindness was something that should be given freely, no matter what one's background was. The father smiled again, this time with a sense of pride. "I hope that by paying for their meal, you've shown them the power of kindness. It doesn't matter if you have a lot or a little, it's the thought and the intention behind the gesture that counts." Emma was speechless, her heart swelling with a mixture of emotions. She had unknowingly played a small part in teaching the girls a lesson about generosity and giving, but she was also reminded of how easy it was to misjudge a situation based on appearances. "I didn't expect any of this," Emma said softly, finally finding her voice. I thought they needed help." "They do," the father said with a wink. "We all do. We all need help from time to time. But kindness is something you can give freely, without expecting anything in return. And you, Emma, have shown that beautifully today." As the conversation came to an end, Emma felt a deep sense of respect for the father and his family. They weren't just rich, they were rich in values, in love, and in their desire to make a difference. It was a humbling realization, one that stayed with her long after the family had left the cafe. As the father and his daughters left the cafe, Emma stood quietly behind the counter, watching them walk out the door. The day had taken an unexpected turn, and Emma felt a mixture of emotions swirling inside her. She had always prided herself on being kind to others, but today she had learned something more profound, something she would carry with her for the rest of her life. The warmth that had settled in her heart earlier in the day when she had helped the twins now felt even stronger. She had made a difference, but the twist was that, in the end, it was the twins and their father who had made a far bigger impact on her. Their kindness, their understanding of generosity, and their humble way of giving back were lessons that went far beyond the food she had bought for them. It wasn't just about paying for a meal. It was about the way that small act had opened Emma's eyes to the true power of kindness. As she wiped down the counter, she thought about the father's words. "Kindness doesn't matter how much you have. It's the intention behind it that counts." Emma realized how true that statement was. She had assumed that wealth defined generosity, that only people with financial resources could afford to be kind. But now she understood that generosity wasn't just about money. It was about the heart behind the action. A few hours passed, and the cafe started to quiet down. It was almost closing time when Emma heard the familiar sound of the doorbell. She turned to see the father and the twins entering the cafe again. Emma's heart skipped a beat. What could they possibly want now? Had they come to thank her again? She quickly moved toward them, unsure of what to expect. "Good evening again." The father greeted her with a warm smile. This time, he wasn't just polite. He looked genuinely happy to see her. The twins, holding small gift bags in their hands, stood quietly beside him. Their faces were glowing with excitement. Emma raised an eyebrow, confused but intrigued. "Hello again. What brings you back?" she asked. "We wanted to thank you properly," the father said. "It's not every day someone goes out of their way to help, especially when it's unexpected. We didn't have the chance to express our gratitude fully before, so we thought we'd come back and do so now." The twins stepped forward, their eyes sparkling as they held out the gift bags. "We made these for you," the older girl said shyly, her voice soft but sincere. "We wanted you to have something special." Emma's heart swelled with emotion as she took the bags from them. "You didn't have to do this," she said, trying to fight back the lump in her throat. "But thank you. This means more than you know." The father nodded, his expression filled with pride. "They've been learning how to give back. And you, Emma, are a perfect example of that. Your kindness inspired them to do something special for you. You've made a lasting impact on them." Emma felt her chest tighten with gratitude. She hadn't expected anything in return. In fact, she hadn't even considered that they might want to give her something back. But here they were, showing her the full circle of kindness. The gesture wasn't about the gifts, but the thought and love behind them. It was the final piece of a beautiful lesson she had learned. When Emma opened the gift bags, she found small handcrafted items inside. Simple, yet meaningful. One bag contained a beautifully designed necklace, and the other held a small frame with a handwritten note that said, "Kindness makes the world a better place." The words seemed so fitting, so true, and Emma couldn't help but smile. The twins had created these gifts with their own hands, a true reflection of the love and appreciation they felt. Emma felt an overwhelming sense of connection to this family, even though she barely knew them. In the span of just a few hours, they had taught her so much about generosity, humility, and the impact of small acts of kindness. The father, with his quiet wisdom and gentle spirit, had shown her that wealth wasn't just about material things, but about the richness of the heart. And the twins, in their innocence and purity, had reminded her that kindness had the power to change lives, no matter how small the gesture. The father placed a hand on Emma's shoulder as he turned to leave. "Thank you again, Emma," he said, his voice full of gratitude. "You've shown my daughters what true kindness looks like, and for that, we are forever grateful." As the door swung closed behind them, Emma stood still for a moment, taking it all in. She was overwhelmed with emotion, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment that went beyond just her work at the cafe. Today, she had experienced something extraordinary, something that would stay with her forever. As she finished cleaning up and prepared to close the cafe for the night, Emma reflected on everything that had happened. She realized that the true power of kindness wasn't about grand gestures or receiving recognition. It was about the ripple effect, the way one simple act could create a wave of positive change, touching others in ways that couldn't always be seen but were always felt. That night, as she walked home, Emma felt lighter, more at peace. She knew she had made a difference, but more importantly, she knew she had learned an invaluable lesson about giving, receiving, and a profound impact of kindness. It was a full circle of kindness, one that had started with her and ended with a family of strangers becoming an unforgettable part of her story. The gift she had received from them wasn't just the necklace or the note. It was the lesson that kindness, no matter how small, always comes back around. And sometimes, the smallest gestures have the power to change everything.